There is no better way to build a stable, long-term career than through your personal brand. It is something that we know we need to do, but never know exactly how. Like, do we have to write posts on LinkedIn or go on networking events? Like, how do people with strong personal brands create it? How does this work? And is there only one way to do it? Today I will give you structured, tried and tested 10-week guides together with the ridiculously detailed notion template to rethink your expertise, understand how to use your unique strengths, and how to make money out of it. This is the most content-heavy video that I've ever made on my channel, so I decided to split it into two parts. In part one, we will cover weeks of unpacking yourself, collecting feedback the right way. We will break free from the burden of self-doubt that all of us as experts have. And finally, we will repackage ourselves and create our own narrative. In part two, you will find out what type of expert are you? The one who relies on a public professional brand or on strong professional reputation. And I will give you a detailed step-by-step guide for each of these paths, depending on which one you will decide to take for yourself. I have my experience of 15 years in corporate. I saw many people who tried to build their professional brands very differently. Some of them succeeded, some of them did not. So I took all of this knowledge and compressed them into this two-part video because I don't think that we should gatekeep this knowledge, and my biggest hope is that you will follow it and this will help you achieve your career goals. Let's go. This exercise will not require a crazy amount of time, but will require some consistency. So choose the time that is comfortable for you. After work or on weekends, find a place where you won't be disturbed, because you will be doing some important reflections about yourself. And to do it at its best, you need some, like calmness and mental capacity. And don't take this as a race. Take it as an exploration. It's a game of discovering yourself. And also, of course, you can read through all of 10 weeks in 2 hours, and in theory you can do that. But the trick is not how fast you can go through it, but how much thought you can put into all of these exercises. Week 1 is all about gathering facts about yourself. So we will revise all of your professional expertises, and all these facts will create a foundation for you to rebrand yourself. Because to repackage something, you first need to properly unpack it. And this is what we're gonna do. So take a step back and answer a few questions. First, list all of your experiences. Pull your CV, remind yourself everything that you had. Your work experience, full-time, part-time, side hustles, entrepreneurship experiences, internships, whatever comes to your mind. Everything you had in your life, even if it feels irrelevant, that's all right, add as much as you can. Now list all of the skills that you have, skills that you developed with all of the experiences that you had. Maybe you're good in communication or leadership or problem solving or something like specific hard skills that you have because of the nature of your job. List it all there. And usually at work we train multiple skills, so I assume your list of skills will be longer than your list of working experiences. Now it's time to recall your education. All of the diplomas, courses, upskillings, anything that you had, put it there. And then I want for you to list all of your achievements, all of the things that when you think about, you can say, okay, I'm proud that I did that. This is something that I did well. So put it all there. This was step 1. A little bit time consuming maybe, but still an easy mode. Now we're moving to step 2, which is a little bit more advanced, and we will be listing all of your unfair advantages. If you've never come across of the concept, it's actually used in business as well. So for us, for normal people, unfair advantages are all of these unique and hard to replicate things that we have and that sets us apart from others. It can be education, location where you live, family, wealth, natural talents that you have, the networks that you have access to, knowledge of a certain field that you, for example, already possess, or just you being born in a certain privileged environment. These things can be very helpful for us, so we should be aware of that and we should not neglect them. Now, the third step is when we're taking a deeper look at ourselves. So I want for you to list things that you genuinely enjoy doing as a human being. What type of things bring you joy when you do it? Then think about things that you usually excel in, things that you are good at doing. Because with full honesty, these categories, they can overlap, but they're not always fully overlapping. Sometimes we enjoy doing something that we're not really good at, and vice versa. And finally, I want for you to recall, what do people usually ask of you? Your friends, your colleagues, your managers, your peers, people you work with. What is that people usually ask for your help in? Because things like that give us different clues on what we as people are actually good at, where we give and bring value to other people. Doing all that is incredibly important because we don't usually, take a step back and do a review of all of the experiences and skills that we have. And when we think about our expertise, there are so many things that we tend to forget or neglect. So week number 1 is for us to remember everything that we already know about ourselves. If week number 1 was all about how you perceive yourself, week number 2 is about how others perceive you. Because it doesn't matter how good are we at analyzing ourselves, sometimes others see something that we don't. So this week we're collecting the feedback to use it later on to understand ourselves better. Feedback collection can be tricky because on one hand, you cannot just go to a random person and say, hey, what do you think about me? And on the other hand, you should not approach it too formally, how sometimes companies do. In some companies, this process is very complicated and this is not what we're looking for. So we need to find the right balance that will be kind of both practical and comfortable and hopefully not too awkward. Now, step 1 for you is to identify your feedback sources, meaning people who will you request the feedback from. It can be your colleagues, people at the same level as you are, someone you work together with. It can be your managers or mentors if this is comfortable for you. It can be people in other maybe departments or someone that you collaborate cross-functionally who also had a chance to witness how you work and have something to share with you. Or maybe a friend that also works in a similar field. So your first exercise is list 3 to 5 people who can provide you an honest feedback about your professional strengths and areas for growth. Now, step 2 is for you to choose feedback method, because there are different ways how you can gather feedback. It can be one-to-one conversation with the person, if this is someone you trust, or even if you're in the same physical locations. So you can always say, hey, I'm thinking about my strengths and how I perceived at work. What do you think about, what am I known at? What do you think I'm good at? So kind of like a casual one-to-one conversation. Or you can always send a message to a person if you don't have a chance to talk to one another. You can always say, hey, I'm doing a self-reflection exercise. What do you think are my top 3 strengths? Something simple and straightforward. Now, if you're up for unfiltered feedback, you can always go with anonymous survey. Popular option. A lot of people create this type of forms in Google or any tool. There are endless. So you create this form and you send to a list of people that you want to. And sometimes people create elaborative surveys, which I would not recommend for you to do. Take very, very simple questions. What are my biggest strengths? What are my main areas for development? And there is third optional one that I also like. If you would need to introduce me professionally, how would you do it? Because it helps you understand how others describe you as an expert, which often helps to look at yourself and your expertise from a very different angle. Finally, there is a chance that maybe you don't even need to request that much feedback, because in many companies there are established practices of doing this 360 rounds of feedback, so maybe you already have something. Take a look and see if maybe recently you already had some feedback received. Now that you've learned multiple feedback methods, for each of the person that you've picked to collect the feedback from, decide which method you plan to use. Use the second week to collect all of this feedback, and at the very end of this week, analyze it. Take as much as you can, everything that you've collected, go through it and look for a few things. First, I want you to look for recurring themes across multiple feedback points. So for example, there is a strength that several people mention. So I want for you to look at this feedback and look for patterns there. But that's not all. Often when we read the feedback, there are things that kind of surprise us that we're not sure if we agree with or we maybe never noticed before. And I really want for you to look for these inconsistencies, because as human beings, we have a certain expectation on how we are perceived, our own idea, and it's very easy to be biased about it. So if there are some differences between how you perceive yourself and how others perceive you, this may be a very powerful, insightful point. So look and list all of the surprises. Now, the next step is incredibly important, because now that we've collected all of this feedback, I want for you to ask yourself, does this align with how I want to be perceived as a professional? Is there something that I'm good at that I want to be more emphasized than how people observe me right now? Or is there any skill gap that I want to address? So your next exercise for week 4 is this. Based on the feedback, describe in one sentence, how are you currently perceived by others? And after you do that, write another one sentence about how you would want to be perceived. For example, at the end of this 10-week exercise. There is a big impact in not being too elaborative with words, let's say. So when you need to compress a lot of meanings in one sentence that would make sense to you, it's a very powerful exercise in you understanding yourself. And with that, we're moving on to week number 3. And prepare yourself, because it's not an easy week. But to be honest, I think this is the most impactful week out of all 10. Because on the week number 3, we will be uncovering some hidden thoughts that hold us back in owning our expertise. Because we all have things that make us doubt ourselves. Maybe someone in the past made us think that we're not good enough, or maybe we compare ourselves to others a little too much. And these thoughts shape how we act, even if they're not true. So this exercise will help you find the number one thought that makes you doubt yourself, understand where it came from, and hopefully stop it from controlling you. Step 1 is to identify what is holding you back. Many of us have this negative thoughts that creeps in, like in the worst possible moments when we are at our lowest. And I want for you to find out what is yours. What is kind of the sentence that runs through your brain when it happens? Or the one that is powerful for me is, what do you fear that people will think about you the most? What is like the scariest thing that you can imagine that people will think of you or like judge you for? Or maybe recall the situation of a failure, the last time you failed. What do you usually tell yourself when you're still experiencing it? Answers to these questions help reveal these negative beliefs or narratives that we tell ourselves in the worst possible situations. So I want for you to formulate it in one sentence and write it down. Step number 2 is find out, where did it come from? Because all of these thoughts, they didn't come from nowhere. They started somewhere. So let's identify where. For example, do you remember a specific moment when you felt this way for the first time? Maybe did someone say something that made you believe it? Your parents, or a teacher, or a manager, or even a friend. And now I want for you to think about this. Has anything happened in your career that's reinforced this negative belief? Because if this happens, it kind of makes these negative thoughts stick to us so much stronger. All of these exercises, they require a lot of vulnerability. I totally get that. So let me maybe give you mine. One of the thoughts, these negative thoughts that I struggle for many years is that I'm not smart enough. I think I've been in surroundings where being smart was incredibly important, even more important than being a good person sometimes. So I would struggle a lot with this idea that I'm not smart enough. And although we all understand that even extremely intelligent people make mistakes, and this is normal and this is part of life experience, I used to use every mistake that I would make to make myself believe, okay, no, this is another proof that I'm not smart enough, right? And I would totally ignore the fact that everyone makes mistakes, and you cannot use the fact of a mistake to make judgment about how intelligent the person is. Yep, so there you go. This one is my negative belief, and I want for you to, after all of this reflection, to write down yours. Step number 3 is to rewrite your story. Because now when we know where this whole negative thought started, we can take away its power power. If your very best friends, I want you to think and visualize your best friends. If your very best friends would think this negative thoughts about themselves, what would you tell them? Or if you would have to find proof that this negative narrative is not true, what proof would you bring? Like, play a devil's advocate. If you have to disprove this negative thoughts, what is the evidence that you would show? Finally, these thoughts can be very abstract and kind of like generalizing things. So if you would need to bring it a little bit closer to the reality, I want you to answer this. What is a better, more accurate way to say this? What is more accurate way to formulate this thought about yourself? And now your exercise is to rewrite these thoughts into something much stronger. For example, you can think that, I don't know, you're not strong enough to be a leader. And the way to reframe this negative thoughts and this negative narrative would be, I trust my judgment, I have good ideas, and I often, my judgment is correct. And making mistakes is a part of being a human being, and even very intelligent people make mistakes. Something like that. Now it's your turn. Rewrite your negative self-belief. And step number 4 in our very intense third week is to act as if. I really like this step. I think it's an exciting step. So what I want for you to do is this. Imagine that this negative thoughts does not hold you back. How would you act? I want for you to think, what would you do differently in your career now that you're no longer believing these negative thoughts? Which I think is usually kind of liberating to think about. As a cherry on the top, I want for you to write down one action that you can do next week to prove that this belief is not true. With that, we're moving on to week number 4. Now, week number 4 is fantastic because it's finally time for us to create our own narrative. We will be using everything we've learned, everything that we've unpacked about ourselves, our experiences, our skills, our beliefs. Now it is time to make sense of it all and define what is your real impact, what is your signature strength, and what is your personal mission. Step 1 is to formulate your real impact. And we need to remember that as experts, like, none of us exist in a vacuum. We don't exist separately from people we bring value to, or like from the changes that we create with our expertise. So, and to understand yourself as an expert, it's incredibly important to realize and understand what is this core value that you bring to others. And to do that, here's the exercise. First, I want you to list who relies on your work. It can be your teams, your managers, it can be different companies or your clients or customers. Maybe you create something physical with your work, or maybe you contribute to something good. Like, list big categories of who relies on your work. Then formulate what problem do you solve for them? Why what you do exists, basically. If it's hard to think about it, maybe ask yourself, what would go wrong if you weren't there for them? And finally, is there an example of a time when you would make a real difference? Answers to these questions are, what is your real impact as an expert? What do you bring to the table? Step 2, let's formulate your signature strength. You've consolidated so much information about yourself from your brain, from brains of others. Now it's finally time to put it into some tangible words. Formulate in one sentence, of course, you could have guessed by now. So formulate in one sentence. What is this one thing that you're good at, that you're doing well, and that people recognize in you? And finally, step number 3, let's formulate your personal mission. There are books dedicated to only this, how to formulate a personal mission, but that's all right, we can do this. So, in a nutshell, mission statement is a 1 or 2 sentence phrase that captures what you stand for professionally. It's about what drives you and what you want to create with your work. And to formulate the mission, you can follow a simple template. I help someone do something so that the outcome is happening. For example, I help companies to make data-driven decisions to grow sustainably. Or I build teams that create great products that are human-centric, people-centric. Think about it. Write a few variations, but pick only one. Well, congrats, you're at the end of week 4 and you're almost halfway there in the journey of rebranding your expertise. In the next video, I will be talking about 2 types of expertise, depending on your personal preference. One path is more public and one path is more private. So write me a comment if something resonated with you in this video, or if you're excited about the next one, because practically speaking, your comments are the only way for me to effectively communicate with you. And also your comments make my day, and most of the people who watch my channel are very intelligent and very sweet, and I do value your opinion, so please express it in the comments. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.